Hello, it's layperson Lisa with a reflection on the 11th week in Ordinary Time. A few months ago, I went to the library and checked out this DVD that was inspired by a story of faith. And so I watched this DVD, and it turned out it was a story of the main guy on Duck Dynasty, and I couldn't tell you much about that other than they make duck calls, but I can tell you that at the end of the movie, it said that this guy had brought over 10,000 people to Jesus. And so it made me think, like, Lord, why can't I do that? Why am I not able to bring these thousands and thousands of people to you? And the parable that Jesus tells us today reminds us that we just need to be open to doing one small thing. And it reminded me of when Deacon Dave had been approaching the time when he was going to finish his 40 days of radiation. And a woman had approached Debbie and asked if she could be there for his last day. And then Debbie and I were talking. She's like, "Oh, that's a good idea. We should invite several people to come and celebrate Deacon Dave's last day of radiation." And so we sent out all these texts, and over 50 people were there to show their love and support for Deacon Dave on his last day of radiation, which really touched his heart. And so this little thought, this little idea rolled into this big, beautiful show of appreciation and love. And that's what the parable of the mustard seed is about. It's about doing small things and how Jesus can magnify them, how Jesus can help them grow. And in the beginning of today's gospel, we hear about a man who just spreads seeds, goes to sleep, and the next day, he doesn't know why, but there's growth. And it just shows that we're called to not depend on ourselves, to not be self-reliant, but to depend on Jesus, to depend and trust in the Lord, to invite him in to all of our struggles, to all of our trials, to all of our brokenness, to our sin. We are called to invite him in, and there's no better place to do that when we receive him in the Eucharist. He just wants us to let him in, to let him into our sufferings, to let him into our trials, to depend and trust in him, especially during these times, so that we are yoked to him and that he can bear our burdens. And when we develop this more intimate relationship with Jesus, we develop this freedom. We develop this freedom to be open to receiving, to saying yes to these nudges that he gives us, these little nudges that can turn into great things because of him. And the end of today's gospel reading, Jesus talks about being a teacher. And what does that truly mean, to be a teacher? To be kind, to be non-judgmental, to be patient, to be understanding. And that is what Jesus is calling us to be to other people. Maybe we think these are little things, but they're actually very challenging. And these little things Jesus can magnify in great ways, which is the theme of today's gospel. St. Paul tells us that we walk by faith and not by sight. And when we walk by faith, we again are focused on Jesus. Instead of the world, instead of the distractions, instead of our trials and struggles, we're focusing on Jesus and allowing him to enter in to these areas so that we may have more patience, more understanding. We may be more loving and more kind. Because when we're going through things, I think that's when we can more easily become frustrated, more easily become impatient. When we turn inward, we're thinking about ourselves, so we can disregard kindness for others. We can disregard kindness for we can disregard having understanding for others because we're focused on ourselves. So in today's readings, Jesus is asking us, what are the little things that he is calling us to say yes to? That he can use to magnify his kingdom, to magnify his love, his patience, his understanding, his love to others. And I invite you to be open to hearing his voice and to saying yes to what he is calling you to do.